Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. I'm very excited. We got two new faces here. Both Ben and Isaac have never been on the show before. Thank you guys for coming on. I'm going to get to you guys in a second, but while I'm doing that, make sure everybody else at home like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that great stuff, and we will appreciate it because then you get your email every day whenever we go live, which, of course, every day. Now, if you have any thoughts or questions or anything like that, put them in the comment section and we will engage them directly as the conversation moves on. Now, I'm going to give you guys each a chance to introduce yourselves. I'm going to start with you, Ben. Can you give me a 30, 45-second little blurb on who you are, where you come from, and all that good stuff?
Sure. Uh, Ben Frakley, military brat. So growing up, lived kind of all over, mostly the East Coast. My dad was Army infantry. Um, Went on to be a college soccer player and then a college soccer coach before pivoting in 2010, starting to go full time into sport and performance psychology. And from there, went on to work for a couple years with Special Operations Forces, the 75th Ranger Regiment, and then the Toronto Blue Jays for 5 years doing mental skills work for them. And now I own my own sport and performance psychology company, which is called Ready, Set, Resilient. And I work with a lot of professional athletes and executives. Um, and just grateful to be on here with everybody today, chopping it up.
It's going to be sick.
Nice.
I'm looking forward to the convo. Isaac, can you give me a little blurb on who you are, where you come from?
Yeah. So again, thank you for having me on. It's an honor and a pleasure to be on. And for me, grew up in the middle of nowhere, Missouri, like smack dab in the country. My father was a pastor. My mom worked at the school I grew up in, so I really had like zero life experience. And then went to college, partied too hard, found myself homeless, and decided to join the military. And so went to the Marine Corps. Ate some crowns, licked some windows, loved my life. And did some stuff with them, got out, and I kind of just didn't know what to do. I did fitness a lot while I was in the military, helped with their weight management programs and stuff. I was one of the only certified trainers and nutrition coaches in my unit, so I really ran that. Got into helping with the martial arts program for the Marine Corps, and so found like that's what I'm going to do when I get out. Actually found a love for building it. And so now I help other trainers and coaches, build their business and find some freedom there, but really run my company to help other veterans who are transitioning, first responders who are transitioning and need that kind of team, mentality and team space to find their own way. I try and bring them on and help them learn how to be coaches and trainers and build their own business while finding their purpose in that transition. So it's kind of what my focus is on, and why I'm really honored to be on here speaking with you guys, because I know your audience, we're all trying to find our way. And so that's why this is such a powerful, collective.
I'm liking it. I'm liking it. It's going to be a good convo. We got lots of experience here. Sean, you got any thoughts or questions right off the bat before we dive into the actual topic?
Well, you know how I love and enjoy meeting new people with new experiences, new ideas, and just listening to the two introductions there. I'm stoked for the convo, so bring it.
All right, let's dive in. So, living diversely, living diversely, depending on how you wanted to go into it. So, and you may have noticed online, I put out a post earlier, and you may have thought it was a typo, but it actually wasn't. I
Cha-
intentionally,
You're gonna do it, aren't you?
I'm gonna dive
The
right into
Chance
it.
Burrows show. Let's hear what Chance Burrows wants to say.
Well, so there's a difference between the term diverse with an E and diverse with no E. And that is actually based off the fact that the diverse without an E is multitudes of a singular item. So if you have many papers in your desk, you can say there is a diverse amount of papers in your desk, or you have diverse papers in your desk. So when I wrote down living diversely, my thoughts were how to live multiple lives in one lifetime, how to do many different things with your life in one lifetime, rather than diversely living many different ways in a lifetime. So I wanted to get your guys' thoughts initially on the difference there because I think it's a distinct difference. And let's start with that. Isaac, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, just speaking from my experience, my perspective, and I know a lot of people probably, share this same kind of sentiment where we look back at something in our life and think, man, that was a whole different lifetime. Like that was a whole different version of me, a different life. And I know being in the military, you get up, you move, and you start over again. And then you get up, you move, you start over again. It might be a different job every time you move. It might be a different unit, different group, different friends, different leadership. And then you get out, and then you do the same thing 2 or 3 times. I mean, I've restarted probably 6 times in my life. And each time it's all in. We don't really do anything half-assed. We go all in. And so each time it's like a whole lifetime put into a moment of maybe a few years. And then you do the next thing, and it's like, wow, I feel like I extracted a lifetime out of just the past few years. So for me, that's kind of what that stands for, instead of like trying to just dabble in a lot of different things at one time and not really being good at any of them. That might give you diversity, but it's not really giving you something to make an impact in. And so diversely, the way you were kind of, honing in on, to me, is like living the fullest you can in the thing that you're doing and the people you're doing it with. And then when you move on from that, and knowing when to move on from that, being able to let it lie, let it sit, let it be in your past, be proud of it, but understand, okay, this is a new start, a new chapter, and going all in on that new chapter.
Mm-hmm. That's great first thought. Ben, how about yourself?
Isaac, big fan of your answer right there. It's the sentiment around living many lives. Um, you know, I work out of a psychological skills framework with a lot of people that I do work with called acceptance and commitment training. And one of the skills in there is something called self as context, which is very different than self as content. Self as content is like, I am my experiences, I am my rank, I am this position, I am this job. And that can lead to a lot of stuck thinking, especially if you've left that job or no longer play that sport. So this idea that we can live many different lives and experiences, I think that creates a lot of optimism for people, which I think is a really good thing. I know from a personal standpoint too, guys. I thought forever, oh, I'll be a college soccer coach. I was a college soccer player, and now I'll go be a college soccer coach, and that's going to be my journey, and until it wasn't. And then I had kind of this um, two roads diverging in a yellow wood, so to speak, moment where I could have kept going down the college soccer route, but this opportunity to go be a sports psych with the Army Rangers was that kind of whole new life. And now I feel like I'm on my third, and that's just from a career standpoint. Like, we're not even talking about living a life as a dad or living a life as a husband, just really tapping into all these different parts of our identity. Again, that self is context. I'm more than my past. I'm more than my experiences. I think there are some big time psychological and emotional benefits to what we're talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely. Sean, you got some initial thoughts?
Yeah, what I should probably do is establish my diverse life, and that will help set the stage for at least being a case study. I can speak to this topic with some sort of experience, I suppose. So my first career was the military, leaving Tier 1 Special Operations. When I went from there, I went to the Ontario Police College, where I was a use of force instructor. When I left there, I went back to school and became a computer system engineer. When I was almost done that, I wrote a book on computer system engineering. When I was done that, I then went into international security work and traveled around the world doing that thing, private and public. Then when I was finished doing that, I bought a coffee shop in a large city in Canada, and I owned that for 2 years and ran it as an owner-operator until I became franchisee of the year, and then I was bored. And then when I stopped doing that, I then went into coffee roasting, which I've been doing for over 15 years. And when I was into that, I decided to start racing my bike professionally. And when I started pursuing to become a world champion, from there, I then started coaching. And so then I coached high performance athletes all around the world for 15 years, which I just finished about a year ago to come over and do this podcasting gig. The only reason I'm doing the podcasting gig and gave away my company is because a bunch of my nerdy friends asked me to do it. And so I have had several lives, if we can call it that. At least we can establish I've had a number of careers. And each career led to the next career, but each career didn't decide the next career. If you study the logic train of what I just stated, you'll understand that I was going that way and then did a 180 and went that way, and then did a 97 degree and went that way. I went in all kinds of directions. I never hesitated to engage in the void that was in front of me. I pursued based on what I already understood I was capable of, which was taught to me in my first career, my military career. I learned how to do anything I want in the world, believing in myself because I'd been given those skills. So I want to just quickly establish the nuance of what was said already within the military. In your career, you do move around, you do different jobs, you do this, you do that, you're on the left, you're on the right, you're in the out, you're all over the place. But I just look at that as one career because it is to some degree so similar in its bandwidth as compared to a variety of different, extremely different careers. It's just a career. It's a singular entity. You're exposed to a lot, but in a single channel of information, as I like to think of it. So my first career, though it was diverse, was singular in its ability to be called a career versus the 7 or 8 careers that I've had since. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it's good. Any thoughts on that, Isaac?
No, I mean, it definitely makes sense. For me, I mean, I don't have experience from, say, the soft community in terms of what I did in the military, but I know for me with the Marine Corps, especially, they do a really good job at making a community-wide culture. So it doesn't matter what job you have in the military, it's the same culture. That being said, I mean, I went from infantry early on in my career to air wing, doing mechanics work, and then like leading Marines in the air wing. And it was like a 180 even within that community that I was not expecting at all. And it gut checked me, like, honestly, to go from something where you're just surrounded by hard chargers who just want to fight, like that's just all they want to do, to being in an area where it was, and again, not to talk disparagingly about the military or the service that we did, but it was a lot of dog eat dog, everyone out for themselves environment. And that was a gut check for me that felt like it was almost like a whole different kind of lifestyle. And even though the culture was the same, it wasn't the same in terms of like that infantry kind of everyone's looking out for the person on their left and right, to the place where everyone's just looking out for themselves and their own career advancement. And that was one thing that I had to really sit with and be like, okay, this is a different environment. But with that said, how can I not just sit back and accept this environment? How can I bring the great things that was the environment I was in before to this and make a small change in my environment, make a change in my world here, and maybe affect those around me? It did get me in trouble a lot, but I would like to say that I had a positive effect on those Marines around me who were like, okay, this is what this is what it's like. This is the camaraderie that we hear about, that we feel whenever we watch those, infomercials about joining the Marines, that they joined and then realized this isn't it. It's like, oh, it is. You got in the bad, you didn't get in the right area and fix that. But I digress. That's just kind of something. And yeah, it does make sense where it's like, it's all one career. But sometimes we find ourselves in a position where it's like, you have to extrapolate the best of what you were doing and bring it with you because you might find yourself in a place where it's needed.
Yeah, I got to say that's a fair categorization, and I was too generalistic in my commentary because I started off as infantry from day one and remained infantry until I went into special operations, and the infantry is way different than every other organization out there. That's all there is to that.
100%. Ben, you got any thoughts?
I think I just want to touch on maybe the idea that purpose, plays in all this. I think, hearing Isaac and Sean talk a little bit, there were many transitions in there. Yeah, I've done some work with military veterans around transition. I think, you know, it's a myth to think it happens once, like transitioning from time in service to going into being a civilian. I mean, Sean talked about it. He had many transitions along the way, from infantry to special operations to coffee business to engineering to book writing. Like there's lots of probably questions that go along with who am I now and what am I doing? But I think one of the things that can be really cool and helpful in all of this is, being able to answer the why questions behind all of it. I'm a huge fan of Viktor Frankl and his work, Man's Search for Meaning. And one of my favorite quotes in his book is, "Without purpose, man will distract himself with pleasure." And so, I think we need, as we're kind of framing up today's topic, I think we need things to keep us interested. I think we need things to continue to challenge us. And that's one of the awesome things, that probably kept people connected to sense of purpose with their time in service is I know what my purpose is. I serve my country, or I serve this role, or I fight for the people that are around me. Well, when that's gone, that doesn't mean purpose is gone. And so like there can be some, again, optimism, creativity, curiosity. What does it look like to lead while I work in this coffee shop? What does it look like, to be a competitor as I work in book writing space or whatever it is? I think when people tap into purpose or tap into their value system, that can be really helpful as they're transitioning to kind of the next thing. And the other side of it too is if we're going to say a new career is like a new life, we also have to say that a new career could be a death as well. And I think it's really important that as people are looking into like the next life, being clear on beyond money, what do I need to fill me up? What's going to give me fulfillment is really important, and could maybe keep people from, if it makes sense, living too many lives, AKA needing to look for the next thing because the last thing just didn't fill my cup enough.
Yeah. We had the conversation with Alana Stott and Seb on Tuesday on filling the void, and it was really touched on a lot of what you were just saying there. But you're absolutely right, and it's too easy to get tricked into I'll just get to the next thing, I'll just do the next thing, I'll just do the next thing, I'll just do the next thing without any sort of plan. Sean, you got any thoughts?
I do, and I would like to kind of take a yellow highlighter and just highlight what was just said, because it's, man, transitioning into anything, leaving something behind and moving into something new, as we say over here quite often. If you're struggling to do that, or you don't know what the next thing is that's just over the horizon, or you feel a bit of a void in you, or some cognitive dissonance, or you just don't feel like life is running the way it's supposed to run, well, sit down with a piece of paper and a pen at a table and don't get up until you write your why. You got to write your why. You got to figure out your why. The why in the moment, the why for your future. Call it the near future, the mid future, the long future. Doesn't much matter. Everyone knows that I'm a big fan of sitting down with a pen and paper, writing why against your 10-year project. Not your day's project, not your week's project, but something that is long enough that you're deeply considering what you're about to step into and why you're stepping into it. So first off, it's your why, and then it's your how, and then it's how much velocity you're going to apply against that how. 1 out of 10, 10 out of 10, doesn't much matter. Why, how, velocity. Now, all of that's pretty simple to understand. What isn't simple to understand is what is just being mentioned. And that is, I've experienced it at least 8 times in my life, where I've stepped out of something that I was doing, we'll call it well in. I was doing well in it. And I'd sat down with a pen and paper, just like my 15 years of international high performance race coaching. That started with a guy coming up to me, a family man, and he wanted some help becoming a better racer. And I was racing for Specialized down in Texas when we lived down there for 2 years. My wife was working as an engineer down there. So as I was racing for Specialized, he saw my race results. He came up to me and said, "Hey, have you ever considered coaching someone?" Nope, I haven't. I don't want to. But he made a compelling case. And so that night I sat down with a pen and paper, blank sheet of paper, and started identifying why I would even consider coaching this guy. Because I know myself, I know what I'm like, and that's really critical to this conversation. I know that once I start writing down, why am I going to coach this guy? It means, why am I going to coach the world that's going to stack up behind once he comes in through the front door? He was the first athlete, but he wasn't the last. I've coached hundreds of athletes now over the years at all kinds of levels, getting world champions and national champions and all of the good stuff. I could see the future because I know what I'm like. I will put a relentless pursuit against trying to make whatever I'm given better. And so as I was writing down my why, I wasn't just considering why I was going to do it. I was considering, why would I consider doing this knowing what it's going to cost me over the years of investing into this project? It's no small undertaking when we're talking about coaching. I'm not looking after me, I'm looking after other people. They're now under my care and control to some degree. And I feel that responsibility, given that that's what I was taught in my first career. And so these kind of moments where you're making these big decisions, we'll call them, you have to think about not just the now, but you have to think about the long-term, not fallout or ramifications, but the consequences, both positive and negative. But for me, in each of those careers, there was about a year. It's almost predictable for me, where that first year is really uncomfortable. I've said it before. I think I always suffer the most imposter syndrome. Any panel that we ever have, I feel that I own that. I'm the winner. I'm the imposter syndrome winner. And so I really question myself when I step into something, because I don't think I can do it. I don't think I'm the right guy for the job. I don't think blah, 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 whatever. But I am the right guy usually, because I have got good results. But I don't believe it mostly for that first year. That first year for me is really, really uncomfortable, because I have a lot of doubts. But I know my way. I just have to smash through them and trust the process. And I know that the outcome will be a positive outcome. But that first year is a tough one for me. So anyone who's listening to this thinking that you can hop, skip, and jump to all of your various careers and there'll be no consequences, that is not the case. That is not the case. But that isn't a bad thing. You just have to be aware of, this is something that will probably show up. And there are things that you can put in place to mitigate that and come out of it with a real positive outcome.
Yeah, 100%. I do want to remind the people watching, by all means, if you guys got any thoughts or questions, put them in the comment section. We will get to them immediately. Ben, you got any thoughts on what Sean was saying? I saw you kind of nod in the background.
Well, I think it's just helpful to normalize. Sean was just normalizing right now that as much as this can be.
And we got a frozen one. Okay.
I think that was going to be really good as well.
I think so. Yeah, it was. It looked.
It felt like a mic drop.
Could be. Let's. Isaac, you got any thoughts while Ben is unfreezing?
Yeah. Well, while he loads, I would say it. There's a lot of wisdom in that, and for me, just the experience of being able to help people build their business in terms of helping people transition into health and fitness and trying to start up, something that's worth building. I face a lot of people with imposter syndrome, and I have to remind them, like, it's only imposter syndrome if you continue to beat that person every day. If you give in to that person, then you are an imposter. It's no longer a syndrome. Like, you are faking it. But if you can show up despite that feeling and give your best, eventually you're going to show up and be the person that you feel like you're impostoring. But you'll never show up and be that person if you quit, if you like just fall out. And that's one of those things that you can't fall out. Pick up the pace, get with the pack. You know, you're not alone. You have a team of people here for you. Utilize that team of people, but you're only an imposter if you fall out. And that was something that, you know, I try and live by, because again, I feel like I, you know, deal with imposter syndrome too, but I have to remind myself if I show up every day and I be the person that I feel I'm being an imposter trying to be, then eventually I'll show up as that person. If I fall out, then I am that imposter.
That's a great point. Ben, welcome back.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened there, but
Well, I was about to share the secret of life, and
right,
Dude, we were all like,
And
I'm
I
still a
lost-
little disappointed it didn't happen.
while trying to get connected. Isaac might have said it. I just, big kudos to Sean for normalizing that it's both. As much as this can be exciting, it can also be scary. I heard Isaac kind of at the end also validating the doubt piece. Having not served, I can't speak to that specifically, but in terms of like my own transition over the last year, going from kind of side hustling over the last couple of years in my own business to going full time, as in I'm going to bet on myself and my family's really going to count on me. I have, experienced some similarities of what I've heard here today. And that's why I'm such a big believer in the mental skills that need to be practiced. I say a lot of nerdy things. One of the ones I repeat a lot is it's not a skill unless it holds up under pressure. And I think mental skills are the same with physical skills or shooting skills, that you have to practice these things. So when your mind does start to go heavy into not good enough, not going to work out, somebody else can do it better, I'm not a fan of combating that with positive self-talk. I'm not. But what I am a fan of is leaning into what are my values and what would loyalty look like in this moment, or what would ambition look like in this moment. And that has a really powerful way of moving us from a stuck trend and toward a resilience trend. I think imposter syndrome a lot of time also has us thinking way too much about the future and like our big dreams not working out. And in those moments, we're ripped out of the present moment. And again, I think there are mental skills that can help us really drop into where am I right now? Who's the next person I can call? Who can help me with this? Who's somebody in my life that's going to remind me you are the right person for this thing that you're doing right now? And all of those mental skills, like when used regularly, can help us get out of our own way.
yeah, 100%. Sean, you look like you got something to say.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that one of the other little tips or tricks that a person can use is just not making it about themselves. And like I've tried to do, I mean, anytime that I've stepped into something new and I've felt the heat of the moment, and I know it's going to burn me for about a year or so, based on me setting my hellacious pace, where it's like re-entering into the Earth's atmosphere and the ceramic tiles off the space shuttle are peeling off. That's how I kind of enter into a new trajectory. And so if I can hang on for that first year where I'm setting my own problematic pace, that's where I thrive the most. And I don't know whether it's my first career that made me have a love for the chaos, have a love for the unpredictable, have a love for the I can't see what's beyond the horizon, but that's where I'm heading. I just love it, man. I love the adventure. And that I think is critical to anyone who's listening, that you've got to know yourself at your core, if you're an adventurer or not, if you're a wallflower or not. And all of these things, whatever labels that we give ourselves, they're all things that you can work with, that you can find ways to incorporate your characteristics or your traits or your personality or your strengths or weaknesses, however you want to categorize it. You can take all of those things and employ them in a way that is more effective and efficiently moving you towards the visualized outcome that you've got over your long-term project, we'll call it. So I'm really comfortable stepping into these things, knowing what I'm going to be facing. But when I'm in it, it's not comfortable. I just hang on, knowing that if I hang on, for lack of a better term, once I've hung on long enough, I start seeing the path in front of me. I start seeing the clarity of where this thing is going. And so day one, it's a bit murky. I know my why. I know my kind of long-term visualized outcome to some degree. I also know that as each day proceeds forward, I get more clarity on the path. And then in about a year, I get clarity on where it's going, where I'm going, what I need to do. But that first year for me, again, is uncomfortable. And when I'm uncomfortable, my way is different than most people's ways. I like wallowing in the uncomfortableness of the moment. I like the adversity. It really gives me a sense of why I'm doing it. It really kind of ratchets up the importance of what I'm doing. I like to feel the heat. Maybe everyone doesn't like to feel that. And so what strategies in that case, as was already said, you got to start identifying your resources around you, whether it's your family, friends, acquaintances, the collective, subject matter experts, psychologists. It doesn't matter what it is, business coaches. These kind of things are all resources that are wrapped around you that when you're stepping into a new thing is nice if you already know where they're at before you cross the start line on the thing that you're about to engage in. And irrespective of the heat that you face, it's now for you to decide, I can accept a bit more, or, ooh, that's getting a bit spicy. I'm going to ask my buddy what he would do in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
I have one thing real quick to ask in terms of, Sean and, Ben, for you too, being able to, when you change your first thing, like for me, going into the military, they do a really good job at kind of indoctrinating us into their way of life, what we do, how we do it, to the point where, we can be very comfortable, whether it's with a weapon system or mission planning or operations or, whatever it is, we're comfortable with it. I never faced imposter syndrome while I was in the military. I got slammed with imposter syndrome when I got out and was like, I'm going to try running my own business. And, it might be you were a soccer player in college, thought I'm going to be a soccer coach, like a college soccer coach. There's no impact because the culture, the way it works, how it works. But then when you went into psychology and sports psychology, like, did you guys face that same thing where it was like when you were first doing what it was that you were trained to do professionally? Did you face any imposter syndrome in that, or were you kind of like me, hit with the imposter syndrome when you changed from that first thing and realized I'm out of my depth, I'm out of my scope of practice?
That's a great question, Ben. Do you want to start on that one?
Sure. I think it's something that varies in intensity, kind of depending on what I'm doing. I don't think it's ever gone away. What I'm more interested in right now is two things. One, acceptance of that. I don't want to spend a lot of time asking myself, why am I feeling that way? I'd rather get on with it and just say, I'm not feeling that confident right now. I'm not having that unshakable sense of self-belief that I would love to show up right now, but it's not. So it varies in intensity. I'm working with acceptance of that every day. And then again, I mentioned acceptance and commitment training really early on. And for everybody who's listening today, if this is not part of your skill work or framework, change it today. Google this, find this, seek it out. This approach has been around for 50 years, and it can really help people with the concept of psychological flexibility. So, Isaac, what that relates to is one, I could spend a lot of time challenging my internal narrative around imposter syndrome, which does show up, or I could accept the fact that sometimes I'm going to feel a little bit more shaky than others. And then two, what I really need to be interested into is knowing when I'm leaning into the imposter syndrome narrative, what behaviors does that produce? Typically, I will self isolate more. I probably won't ask for help. I probably won't go to YouTube and be like, how do you set up a sports psychology business? And what's that similar to like in other businesses? Um, when I'm accepting of the fact that that's there and also mindful of the behaviors that are going to keep me from the life that I want, I'm able to lean in regardless. And maybe that's what Sean's talking about a little bit in terms of like loving the chaos and loving how intense things can get. But for me, it's one, practicing acceptance, and two, being really mindful of that relationship between thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And if I know I'm heading toward behaviors that are not aligned with my goals and values, I have a pretty good idea of what those look like. And so then I can kind of shift over again to kind of what Sean's talked about. If I've been clear writing down like these behaviors are aligned with my goals and values, calling people, checking things off my list, attacking short-term goals. It's the intent of that is never to make the imposter syndrome go away. It's, can I do it when I'm not feeling confident? That's something I've tried to help a lot of athletes as well, is this idea that like you need confidence. Are we allowed to cuss on here?
No.
Okay. I'm glad I asked.
Me too.
Because I would say that's it's BS. A lot of people think, well, I need to be confident in order to do this, or I need to be motivated in order to do this. Those things come after.
Yeah, 100%. Sean, you got any thoughts?
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit in the past over on the collective about imposter syndrome to some degree, and I've categorically stated that I have an intensely competitive relationship with imposter syndrome. I'll out imposter anyone. So I do have a strong imposter syndrome. I've never really thought about it to the granularity that I just did over the last kind of 60 to 90 seconds since you asked the question. So thanks for asking it, because you asked it in a way that caused me to reflect a little bit deeper. And I've spoken about this generally in the past, as I said, but now I'm going to speak about it a little bit more detailed, given what I just thought. And before I joined the military, I was a skinny, underperforming kid. I've said that in the past. I weighed about 135 pounds, and I thought I was really dumb. That's what the teachers were telling me, because I wasn't interested in school. Freaking school bored me. I'd rather hunt and fish than go to school. I'd rather stare out the window than listen to the teacher drone on. I just wasn't interested. They bored me. They were telling me I was dumb. I thought they were dumb. And as it turns out, I got a pretty high IQ, which I didn't learn until many years later, because I thought I was dumb because that's what I was told. So when I joined the military kind of, you know the deal. It kind of squares you away. It puts a process in front of you. It puts a framework around you that you then get to play in and better understand yourself and the world around you. And so once I understood that, I just started voraciously absorbing it. And in time, my career shaped itself so that I started getting a few titles. I started getting a few badges. I started getting a few things. I started getting a few nods. I became validated in the sense of, that dude's pretty good to go. And so year after year after year, my imposter syndrome, though was still existent, started kind of diminishing simply based on the fact that when I walked down a hallway, someone would give me a nod. And I'd know what that nod meant, because he knew me, I knew him, and it was kind of a big deal, if you follow me. And so after 13 years of getting a lot of nods and feeling pretty confident about who I was, that day I was out on the civilian sidewalk, not knowing anything about the civilian world or not knowing how I fit into it. And so that was kind of like a moment that my imposter syndrome kind of flared up again, because I didn't even know what I was facing. I was kind of feeling like I was in enemy territory to some degree, figuring out how this all works. Because I tell you what, no one was explaining it to me. There was no book on the bookshelf that said, former Tier 1 operators, this is what you do on day one in the civilian world. It just didn't exist. And so I had to bumble my way through life, through various careers, figuring it out by myself or through research patterns or just following my intuition. And as it turned out, I had some successes, I suppose. But on that day out of the military, I went from imposter syndrome starting here, and years later it kind of trickled down to about here, to back here when I went back out on Civilian Street again. So now I've brought it back down to kind of here again, but it's still part of me. Now, here's the best news, at least for me anyway. Once I realized that my cycle of imposter syndrome occurs in this patternized format, then I just started wielding it like a scalpel. Like, to me, it's now a tool. It keeps me honest, we'll call it. It keeps me driven, we'll call it. It keeps me edgy, we'll call it. And so it pushes me. It pushes me in a way that is positive rather than negative. Because now I understand it as a scalpel to wield. And I've wielded it so much that I see the results it creates. And I like those kind of outcomes. So I'm not throwing imposter syndrome right out the window to get run over by the bus. I kind of hang on to it a little bit because I'm kind of good with it.
I like that you said that, Sean, because you talk about like you enjoy and thrive in the chaos. And for me, like we have this saying of embrace the suck. And like I genuinely love it. Like I love that process, just feeling exhausted, tired. Like you gave every ounce of energy you had. And you know, it's something that's very important to me. And the way that we would share that in like how you guys talked about shared adversity before, and you know, you do a really hard, you know, Murph, and you know, slide down the wall, and that, you know, just look at the guy next to you. You don't even have to say anything, and you just, you know, like you guys are sharing that moment. It's shared adversity. Well, when dealing with like this imposter syndrome, like we don't have anybody to share that adversity with in the moment, and that's why it feels so daunting. And for me, just like you wield it as a scalpel, I've realized for me, it's like a sparring, like a really good sparring partner. And if I embrace that suck, if I truly enjoy that sparring session, you know, you know, that rolling session with this partner that I have, that is the imposter syndrome, that, you know, eventually I might get tapped out a few times, but I'm going to learn how to defend the armbar. I might, you know, get jabbed. I might get some bloody noses, but I'm going to learn how to move and duck under the jab. Like I'm going to learn these things. And if that imposter syndrome just overtakes me and I quit, I'm never going to learn. So I realized that imposter syndrome is actually the learning curve. And that if I keep, you know, just going with it and embracing the suck and learn and grow, that eventually that's where these little nuances of thought patterns and learning new skills happen. And without the imposter syndrome, there is no learning new skills. There is no learning new thought patterns, because that's a part of that process. So for me, it's like you with the scalpel. It's me with like a new rolling partner or sparring partner. And if I can show up and learn from that person, because they're obviously better than me, and that imposter syndrome is better than me, but I'm not going to give up. I'm going to learn from it. I'm that guy who shows up as a white belt saying, give me the purple belt that can teach me in the moment, because I know it's going to suck. It's going to hurt, but I'm going to learn. I'm not going to learn from watching them do it. I'm going to learn from getting the arm bar put on me like 20 times until I realize, no, I need to put my weight into them. I need to move my hips. I need to get over. Like, that's just the way I do it. So I embrace that suck. And I treat it like it's a partner.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was just thinking that a lot of the students that I teach in jiu-jitsu, I say this often: straight arms get armbarred. And I'll say it in the rolls, right? Straight arms get armbarred, and then they'll be like, oh, right, and then pull it right back in. But I really love this in terms of living diversely, because when you enter into any new life, right, into any new life, as we were saying earlier, you know, fatherhood, or a new career, or perhaps you get a divorce, or maybe you get fired, like any type of new life, I think you're going to experience the imposter syndrome, I love the idea of changing the mentality of that into something useful rather than something to hide from. And it, to my point earlier when I was, you know, talking about the difference between diversely and diversely, was the fact that you can live a life that is 10 miles wide and 2 inches deep, as Sean likes to say. And he actually said of me a number of times because it was true. Um, but I wanted to just kind of touch back on this is that do you think that perhaps the imposter syndrome is the maybe the wall that prevents people from living full lives in or fully experiencing the things that they're doing versus uh, trying it, nope, not for me, and then moving on to something else, and then being too diverse, if that makes sense. Ben, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
Mm, the question was, does it keep people from going for it? If I'm paraphrasing,
Basically, yeah. Do you think that that's what keeps people from going forward, or do you think it's something else?
I think it can. I mean, I think everyone's past plays a role in their future.
Mm-hmm.
Some may let that play more of a role than others, but if I mean, Sean brought up some really relevant aspects from formative years of his life. People were telling him, this is who you are. Thankfully, he had organizations that helped him unlearn that, but he still had to step in. So, yeah, I think that's a huge it depends. I think a lot of that also has to do things like our own upbringing. That's a factor. So count that as a data point. Second is going to be um, alternative experiences. Like all three of you guys were put into very resilient systems. The military can foster some resilience. When I worked with 75th Ranger Regiment and I heard all those dudes every morning stand up and cite the Ranger Creed of what it meant to be an Army Ranger, I guarantee you, if I grew up for 18 years of my life and people told me I sucked, but then I stood next to those guys and they taught me what to be, they taught me what it meant to be an Army Ranger, that imposter syndrome is probably going to start to fade. But that is a huge it depends. And then I think a third of probably thousands of factors is going to be when people, especially military population, it's probably a lot of listeners, when they do step out of uniform and into that next chapter, if they don't have a strong support system around them and they're left to just confront that internal narrative, if it is that, it can be debilitating. If it's there, but they also have people like you guys that they can chop it up with and be safe enough to verbalize it, and you can start to build a plan around that, then I think, like in Sean and Isaac's case, that narrative can be somewhat facilitative. Like, oh, you don't believe in yourself? I'll show me today what that's going to look like. And so,
Welcome to my life.
so that's a huge it depends. But thanks for putting me on the spot first.
No problem, man. This is what I'm here for. Isaac, what do you think?
I mean, Ben hit it. It depends, but it's both, right? It can be the wall, or it can be the thing that you use to scale the wall, and it's not like there's a wall or no wall. It's not like there's just never imposter syndrome, unless you are just gifted to think that you are just the bee's knees, the best thing ever. And oftentimes that's just because you haven't done something that's truly adverse to humble you. And whenever you've been through something that's truly adverse and humbles you, imposter syndrome's there. Like you'll figure out real quick. And so when going through something, and for me, it's helping people build their businesses. Almost every single one of them faces imposter syndrome. If not every single one of them faces imposter syndrome. And for some of them, it's that wall that's immovable and there's no way they can do it. And they turn around and they fall out. They fall out of the pack. They quit. Other people, it's that sparring partner. It's like, all right, well, I might fail today, but I'm going to learn how to take that one step. Like, I'm going to learn how to build the ladder. I'm going to learn how to set the anchor. I'm going to learn how to build the charge, how to set the charge. Like, I'm going to learn how to blow up that wall, and then I'm going to get past it. And then there's going to be another wall. Then it's going to need a bigger charge, but I'm going to learn how to do it. I'm going to set it, and I'm going to blow past it. And then there's going to be a bigger wall. And there's always these levels of the imposter syndrome, no matter what you do. But if you're always learning from it and showing up and doing what it is necessary, going through those checkpoints, those reference points, then you're going to learn how to overcome that phase of the imposter syndrome to get to the next one. And for some people, they just don't have it. They can't handle that adversity, and they're too scared to share that adversity, that they just hightail and go back to what's comfortable. And so I keep referencing the adversity, talk that you guys had, but it really is like, you have to, as Sean was saying earlier, go through your reference list, and like, who do you have that you can talk to, be an accountability throughout this process, so that you don't just hightail it and quit and go back to what's comfortable, but you show up and accept, as Ben had said earlier, acceptance is a big thing. Accept the fact that this is scary, this is new, this is hard, this is not going to be perfect, but I'm at least going to try. And out of that imperfection, I'll learn something. And that's how we slowly build up competence and slowly scale down the feeling of imposter syndrome, at least for me.
Yeah, 100%. Sean, I got a question and a comment here, but
Sure.
I want your thoughts
Real
on it.
quick on diversity, living a diverse life, living a diverse career path, living a diverse selection of friends, seeing more of the world, we'll call it. That will create something called a three-dimensional model of the imposter syndrome. When I left the military, and I had all of these titles, and I thought I was like really good to go and I could do anything in the world. In my mind, that's what I still tell myself today. I can literally do anything in the world if I put my mind to it. But when I was standing on that day one on the civilian sidewalk, I was thinking that. I just didn't understand the world at the time. I didn't understand how to play the game within the game. And so it took me a while to figure it out. But once I engaged in that next step, that next career, that next move, that next change, what I started to do was develop a three-dimensional model of the imposter syndrome. Nuance, granularity, an understanding of what imposter syndrome can mean to me, not just as a single word, imposter, but the multifaceted aspects of what imposter syndrome means when you have studied yourself in a variety of different environments on a bunch of new day ones, where you understand how you respond and what your pattern is in respect to imposter syndrome. The only way to get better at something is to observe trend, patternize, and then get to work on improving it or using it or wielding it, we'll call it. So imposter syndrome, the good news is the more that you consider yourself as an imposter within these new moments is an opportunity to develop a better understanding of who you are as an imposter and then how to get better with it. So you talked a little bit about BJJ. So I've been doing martial arts for a long time prior to turning towards BJJ. And so I tied on my white belt in BJJ when I turned 52, and that was 8 years ago. And so on that day one, I had 32 years of martial arts prior to that night, and I got my ass kicked. And that's the way it is, man. I mean, that is the way it is. Day one is an ass kicking in anything that you do. You want to start a new company, you want to learn how to fly a plane, you want to get a dog, you've never had a dog before, you want to start macrame and it's your first day on macrame. Doesn't matter what it is. It's a new thing where you've got to figure yourself out in the moment. And here's what I would encourage everyone not to do. Just start something and then stop thinking. Don't do that. Start something new and start thinking about how you're doing in the moment. Use the new thing as a way to understand the new you as you evolve within that process. If you pay attention to your imposter syndrome, all of the syndromes, all of the things, day after day within that first week. Go easy on yourself, but use it as a pathway to better understand who you are on that path.
Bam. Mic drop right there, I think. Now I have a question from Cody, but he has a kind of a long comment here I wanted to hit on too, because he really puts a fine point on this, and he says, repeated and consistent efforts build not only confidence but also resilience. When you continually practice and maintain your commitment to a task or skill, you not only gain confidence in your abilities, but also develop the strength to persevere through challenges and setbacks. This combination of practice and determination equips you to face obstacles with unwavering resolve, ultimately leading to greater success and personal growth, which I think is a great summary of basically everything we've said so far today. But then he has this one question. I'm going to bring it to you all here. Does your why have to be specific? What is it? What if it's just a feeling you've always had and are finally taking action? Is it imperative that you put it into words? I'm going to pick Isaac because I picked Ben last time. What do you think, Ben? Or Isaac, sorry. What do you think?
Now, this might be just my unique perspective here, but when I have people, building a business, they're putting a lot on the line. Most of us are older. We have families, kids, wives, husbands, there's a lot to tie in. It's easy to quit and go back to what's comfortable, because what's comfortable is typically something stable. And so with this, when it's a feeling like, oh, I've always felt like I should work for myself or have my own business, or I always felt like I belonged in whatever industry, that feeling is very faint, like fleeting whenever you're hit with real adversity. And so if you feel like you've just always wanted to be in the military, but then bullets are flying, that feeling fleets if you're not actually have like with resolve, like a true why. And so I have my people go through a 7-layer of why exercise where it's like, okay, so why do you want to work for yourself? Well, I want stability for my family. Okay, well, why do you want stability for your family? Well, because I don't want my wife and kids worried about where they're going to get, their dinner from, or I want my wife and kids to be able to go on vacation with me. Okay, why is that important? Well, because, I want to spend more time with my kids and my wife. Okay, why is that important? Well, because, when I was a kid, my dad didn't spend much time with me. Okay, so what? Why is that important? Well, because I didn't like the feeling it gave me when I was a kid and I didn't know my dad. So I don't want my kids to have that feeling of not knowing their father, even though they see him every day. That's a why. That is a why. And when times get hard and you want to go back to what's comfortable, you're going to realize, I want my kids to not see a ghost of me. I want them to see me. And I'm only going to be my best self when I'm living out this purpose. So having that actual why is what ingrains that action that you're taking, or the sets of actions that you take in order to show up and beat that imposter, to be that person that you want to be, to have that goal you want to reach. And typically from my experience and the experience of coaching a lot of other people, just focusing on a feeling to get you there doesn't do it. But having a true ingrained why that has a metric value to it, you can't argue that why when times get hard. You can't say, oh, my family's just a feeling. No, you have a kid waiting for you at home. That's not a feeling that goes away. And so for me, that's just my perspective and what I've experienced. So I would love to get, Ben and Sean's expertise and understanding into this as well. But I think having a concrete why is really important.
100%. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, buddy. Isaac, nice. Love it. Nietzsche said, those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how. Mm-hmm. And we've talked plenty today that if you're going to play this life big, there's an opportunity cost to that, i.e. risks, doubt, imposter syndrome. So yes, on specificity, the clearer, the better. And 2, I think this helps cut at the tension between immediate versus delayed gratification. If I do what I'm feeling right now, I'll just go watch old episodes of The Office just because I love that show. But I've got a business to run and I'm trying to grow it. And I can put off those short-term desires for bigger things like autonomy, being able to control my time. And I had an awesome experience. My son was my teacher this summer. He's 13. One of my sons, 13 years old. And he was the only cousin in our family to miss beach week with the family because he had football summer practices starting up and they were mandatory. And so he missed. And you could see him as an adolescent wrestling with, well, I have to be at football, but I want to be where my cousins are right now. But he also this idea of being on the team, being part of the team was really clear enough that he could say no to that thing that he wanted to do in order to chase that kind of bigger thing that is necessary. So I think that why can help us bear with almost anyhow. And I think it can really cut at the tension between what I want right now versus when I have that clear vision for the future. I know I can keep putting my head down right now and getting after it. It's going to be worth it.
Yeah, 100%. Sean, thoughts?
Yeah, so we just now we worked through the importance of granularity and getting to the core of the why, which I love. That's so important, critical. And then we went into not a segue, but a continuation of now we're talking about a son and the importance of the lessons in the moment as to the why and the etc. And I love that, man, because like we're so out of time, but we need another hour to talk about what was just said. Because I mean, we're talking about
Legacy.
yeah, and how to help someone understand. I've got two sons myself. How to have someone understand the importance of diversity, have someone to better understand living a three-dimensional model of life rather than a one-dimensional model of life. As a dad, I felt that that's been my job since my boys were born. And listen, when I tied on my white belt on BJJ at 52, so did my two boys. And my favorite rolling partner is my 19-year-old who's been on the mats with me for 8 years. And so that is me explaining diversity of life to him while helping him understand his imposter syndrome that no doubt he got from me, because the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, where I'm teaching him to be stronger in all moments, or be more flexible in all moments, or be more caring in all moments. The more that I can enrich their lives by demonstrating me enriching my life, that to me is what we're responsible for. Not just being diverse in our own careers, being diverse in the planet, being diverse in etc. We're always being watched. If not by our sons or daughters or by our spouses, we are being watched by the freaking collective. The collective that is all around us, the people who will listen to this, the wisdom that is being dropped in this conversation is being watched. And when I'm over here, I like to talk to my boys. They'll never listen to this, but I want to think that in the years when I die, maybe they'll tune into this and see what the heck their old man was talking about. But it's our job to pass on the diversity of our life through an observed diversity, as far as I'm concerned.
100%. Now, you are absolutely correct. We are a little bit over time. And yes, we would absolutely need another hour to continue on this conversation, which I think we will do tomorrow. We're going to carry on with legacy. It's a great way to carry on this conversation. And let's do some final thoughts on living diversely. Let's get just a general, what are your final thoughts on anything? Ben, you're going first.
Well, this is it today. Just for me, Clay Surratt, who was a guest, on the show recently, was just like, Ben, check these guys out, and without needing to do any additional research, just trusting him, this has just brought so much to my day. Not really knowing exactly where the conversation was going to go, but man, Sean, I'm so grateful for that last wisdom that you just dropped about basically more is caught than taught. We can talk all we want about how we're supposed to be in this world, but it really does all come down to behavior and actions. Um, am I walking the talk? And I know for me, you know, as much most of my day to day has been about living my business life. Um, my kids are going to walk in the door in like 2 hours, and I get to make a decision right there about which life I want to live, and it's going to be the dad life, just based on just that little extra nudge from Sean right there. So just I'm grateful to be with you guys as kind of brothers and teachers for this time today.
We're happy to have you, brother.
Amazing.
Isaac, final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it better than Ben in terms of just I'm honored to be here talking to the collective, and the big thing to take away from this is to own the life you're living, and live it to the fullest. And for a lot of us, that's being a husband, a wife, a parent. Like wear this thing with honor and take care of it and be not just the best business person you can be or the best whoever. It's being the best person that's going to make that impact and leave that legacy on the people who actually depend on you, and understand that there are people watching. So it's one thing to be afraid, but be fearlessly afraid, where it's like even if you are afraid, you're still going to show up and be that best version of yourself in what you're doing. And yeah, that's all I can say. And thank you again for letting me be here and being a part of it.
Absolutely. Happy to have you, Sean.
Awesome.
Final thoughts?
Well, yeah, it's hard to follow up on those two closing statements because it captures my thoughts as well. I suppose what I would say is this, that today is a good example of, I mean, we don't know each other, and we're talking about diversity. We're all very diverse, I'm sure, but yet somehow there's a lot of commonality here. And so I suppose that's the message that I'll leave everyone with. We talked about diversity, but we're not that diverse. Go out and be diverse, but the people that you're with, find the commonality. The only way that I think we can put a layer of diversity into other people's lives to create a veneer of adventurous exploration as to diversity is to demonstrate what it's done for us. Find the commonality in the conversation and then somehow encourage someone else to follow not in your footsteps, but follow in the footsteps that they aren't aware of yet, their own footsteps towards the horizon of a diverse, adventurous life.
Yes, indeed. I don't really have much to follow up with any of that other than Ben, Isaac, thank you so much for the conversation. It has been fantastic. Sean, as always, great chat. Don't go anywhere, guys. Last time we had somebody like bounce out right away. There's going to be a few minutes in the green room after this, so don't take off too early. I do really appreciate all the comments and the questions and everything. It was fantastic conversation. So, as we all learn what diversity is, that means we can build upon the life that we have and grow into the diverse life that we want. And you do that every day here with us on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.